Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. A tip for teachers. Some educator expenses may be tax deductible. Tax tip 2021-104, July 20th, 2021. The educator expense deduction allows eligible teachers and administrators to deduct part of the cost of technology, supplies, and training from their taxes. They can only claim this deduction for expenses that were not reimbursed by their employer, a grant, or other source. So this is a deduction that's specific to a particular industry, the teaching industry. It's been on the books for some time. They haven't really increased the dollar amount for a long time, so I'm kind of surprised that they're emphasizing it here. But it's for a particular industry. It's not an itemized deduction. It's what was used to be called like an above-the-line deduction, which is now, I believe, like a Schedule 1 deduction. And that means it's deductible for adjusted gross income, which means that you can get advantage of it. It will benefit you even if you are not itemizing and simply taking the standard deduction. And it's a kind of interesting thing because normally when you're a W-2 employee, like if you work for a company or in this case, or the government or something like that, then typically you don't get to deduct like expenses that you make generally as a general rule, as you would if you were a sole proprietor, where anything that's for business would generally be deductible. And they kind of made an exceptions for a particular industry a while back, which I think kind of emphasizes the power of the teachers unions really at that point in time when they got that through, because you get this deduction specific to a specific industry, even though they're kind of a W-2 kind of spot. But again, it hasn't really been updated for a few years, so the dollar amount is still fairly low on it, but it's something to keep in mind. My mom was I have educators in my family, so obviously I'm maybe more aware of it than other people would be. But in any case, who is an eligible educator? The taxpayer must be a kindergarten through 12 teacher, instructor, counselor, principal, or aide. They must also work at least 900 hours a school year in a school that provides elementary or secondary education as determined under state law. Things to know about this deduction. So the educators can deduct up to $250 of trade or business expenses that were not reimbursed. So there's the dollar amount. So it's fairly low because obviously, again, if you were like a sole proprietorship and you were doing all your expenses, then you obviously could have a lot of business expenses that were involved. I would think, a lot of educators are probably hitting that $250 pretty easily on, added resources they might use in their classroom. So I would think, if they're a qualified educator, it's, you want to make sure that you're tracking your deductions to take it. But I would think that a lot of educators probably hit that, and therefore it could be a deduction if you're a qualified educator for you. So as teachers prepare for the school year, they should reimburse to keep receipts after making any purchase to support claims that for this deduction. The deduction is $500 if both taxpayers are eligible educators and file their return using the status married filing jointly. So obviously it's per teacher. So if you had two teachers that were joint together or two educators joint together, then it would be $500, but it's $250 for per educator in essence. So the taxpayer cannot deduct more than $250 each year. Qualified expenses are amounts the taxpayer paid themselves during the tax year. Qualified expenses are amounts the taxpayer paid themselves during the tax year. Here are some of the expenses an educator can deduct. So we have the professional development course fees. So I think what they're trying to say on that last piece was, you're on kind of a cash basis. So they're looking at expenses that you paid out of your pocket instead of the school reimbursing you for it or paying for it in some way for these types of things, school-related stuff. So we got the professional development course fees, books, supplies, computer equipment, including related software and services, other equipment and materials used in the classroom. So again, that's a lot. That's books and stuff. So I would think, $250, that a lot of educators probably hit that. And if you're a tax professional and you're working with someone who's a qualified educator, then it's quite likely that they're going to be able to take that deduction. But you want to make sure that you're addressing that special industry deduction and picking it up when necessary, when you can. Again, it's an above-the-line deduction for adjusted gross income deduction, and therefore, if someone is not itemizing, they're taking the standard deduction, they could still get the benefit from it if they qualify for it. So more information can be found on the topic 458, Educator Expense Deduction, Publication 5349, Tax Planning for Everyone. There's links to those items here. There'll be a link to this in the description.